So today we're going to do the cow eye dissection. So I'm getting prepped to do the dissection. I'm putting on my rubber gloves, non-latex gloves. Actually, I've got my lab coat on. I've got my shoes that cover my feet. Can you see that? Lift up my leg even higher. I got my, that was sad. My goggles on, and I have my dissection specimen right here. So this is the area that I'm planning on dissecting on, and it needs to be clean. So I've got a sponge with some soapy water on it, and I'm cleaning my area because we always start with a clean area. And then in my dissection kit, I've got the absorbent pad, and I want to make sure that the absorbent side is up to catch any fluids. Alrighty. Totally mess with the picture probably. Do it again. I'm just tucking it under the edge so it doesn't move anywhere. Nice dissection bin. There's my specimen, and I need some tools because tools are nice. Let's see. I probably put the tools in the box first. I did. Okay. So for this, definitely going to need my blunt probe. Going to need my scalpel. You see all that? Yep. Make sure that I'm on the screen here. I want my scissors. Handy dandy scissors. Let's see, forceps. I think that should do it. Okay, so this and this. Gloved up. I think we're ready to open this up. So I want to open up my specimen so that I can get access to it. And since we're not going to be using the specimen after this particular lab, I'm going to make sure, we should go over this. Remember, perfect solution, we should be in a well-ventilated area. Let's see, don't swallow it. Causes mild skin irritation, so if you get any on your hands, please go wash with soap and water. Let's see, you got your goggles on so you don't have to worry about your eyes. You're not going to ingest it, and because you're in a well-ventilated area, you shouldn't be inhaling it. I don't know why anybody would want to sniff it up that close. Okay, so in the little bag that it came in, to store it, since we're only doing this once and we're done with it. There we go. Okay, so I've got the eyeball out of the bag, and in this particular case, because of the packaging, it's a little warped. Do you kind of see that? So I did get another one out. I've got two. So I got another one out from the back room. It's preserved differently, and because it's preserved differently, it has to remain on campus. So it also has a little bit of a different color. But I'm just going to point out some of the things on the external surface. So on your cow eye, on the way it was preserved, it might have more of a brownish cast, but this portion right here, this is the cornea. So the outermost layer of the eye is the cornea as well as the sclera. So the cornea should be clear, but due to the preservation process and how long it's been stored, a variety of different factors, it has a tendency to become opaque, so you can't really see through it. But chances are we'll be able to see through it once we start our cuts. The other portion of the fibrous layer is the sclera, the white of the eye. And on this particular specimen, it doesn't look very white, but it definitely is a different color, lighter than the anterior cornea is. So here on this one, this is the cornea, and then next to it, the white of the eye is the sclera. Now keep in mind the sclera makes up the ball of the eye, and then the cornea is just the transparent cover. So the sclera is going to make up most of the eyeball. Okay. Attached to the eyeball, we've got several different things that are actually external to the fibrous layer. So on the anterior surface next to the cornea, we've got a thin membrane. I don't have a sharp straight probe in here, do I? You always find out what you need when you don't have it. So I'm going to use a T-pen. I'm going to show you. If I can open it up with gloves on. I need music in the background. What do you think? What kind of song would you prefer? Might clash with what you're listening to right now, huh? Okay, so I've got a T-pen, so I got a straight point. So if I just take my T-pen under this, right next to the cornea, you can see I'm lifting up this layer. This is the conjunctiva. This is the conjunctiva. It's pretty tough here on this one. That's a little bit softer on this one. But the conjunctiva is a membrane that covers the anterior portion of the eye, so it covers the sclera, and then it continues along the inner eyelid. So it comes from the cornea along the sclera, and then doesn't go all the way around the eye, it comes under the eyelids. Okay, so the conjunctiva. And if you have conjunctivitis, you have an infection, itis, which is called pink eye. Perfect. So we've got the cornea, the conjunctiva, using our straight pen, as well as the sclera, the white, the ball of the eye. And you can point out the sclera in a variety of different areas because it's the ball of the eye, with the exception of where the cornea is at. Now, as we look at the eyeball, you can see that there are in this particular case, is these little brown ruffly things that are attached to the eyeball. These are the extrinsic eye muscles. So right here are the extrinsic eye muscles, okay? Around this eye, this is a little bit better because it's not kind of warped. The extrinsic eye muscles has a different color due to the different preservation process, and the extrinsic means outer, outer. Extrinsic eye muscles, they actually work to move the eyeball in the socket. So you don't have to turn your head to move your eye. So as they contract, they move the eye. So we've got the cornea, the conjunctiva, the soft part, the sclera, the hard white part, and then the extrinsic eye muscles. Looking at the posterior portion of the eye, so the anterior is where the cornea is, the posterior we find the optic nerve. So right here is the little optic nerve, and chances are there's a bit of adipose. So if you've ever seen chicken fat, that's the adipose that's around it. Okay, and depending on your specimen, you might have a nice long optic nerve or one that's cut relatively close to the eyeball. If I look at this one, kind of rotate it around, and I can see these muscles. So these are the extrinsic eye muscles, and then sticking out, I have the optic nerve. Do you see that it sticks out in this particular specimen? It sticks out, and then right next to it, this little lump, that is the adipose. So there's lots of adipose on this particular eye. I hope that I got the bad eye and you got a much better eye. Okay, so on the posterior portion, we can see the optic nerve, extrinsic eye muscles, and then there's some yellowish adipose cushioning the eye. And then anteriorly, we have the conjunctiva, as well as the cornea and the sclera. Alrighty, so what we want to do next is to view the internal portion of the eye. And so we're going to actually make a cut through the sclera. And if you recall the pericardial sac from the heart, it was pretty tough, wasn't it? It was composed of fibrous connective tissue. And then we dissected the sheep brain, and we had to remove the dura mater. Dura, tough, mater, mother, one tough mother. It was also composed of dense fibrous connective tissue. Well, the sclera is also composed of dense fibrous connective tissue. So the sclera that makes up the ball of the eye, it's very tough to get through. So what we want to do is we want to make a cut. And we're going to cut around the cornea about 5 millimeters from the cornea. So we are not following the directions on the little sheet that the Carolina sent you. You're following my directions, right? Good. 5 millimeters. So 5 millimeters from the edge of the cornea. So there's the edge of the cornea. That's where we're going to make the cut. And the initial cut to get in there, it's going to be tough. And then inside of the eye, we've got some fluids. So as we make that initial cut and try to penetrate into the fibrous layer, we want to make sure that we don't squeeze the eyeball too hard so that when we gain access to the internal part, it squirts out. True? True. Okay, so I'm going to use the scalpel and I'm going to make an initial cut, and then I'm going to finish the cut using my scissors. So we're going to make a cut about 5 millimeters. So that's about a 1/2 inch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the eyeball next to the styrofoam tray here. I'm going to hold it flush, and so as I hold it like this, I have less chance of squeezing it, okay? Because if I hold it like this in my hand and I start to put pressure here, I tend to start squeezing the whole thing. So I'm going to hold it right like this just to stabilize it, and then I'm going to use, can you see that it's taking? But as soon as I get in, I can feel it, and usually a little fluid will come out. So I have entered into the eye. I can feel that there's just fluid back there, so we're good. So I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to dry it on the edge, and just preserve it here for now because I'm not going to use it anymore. And then I'm going to use my scissors to cut around the cornea. So I'm kind of making like the pumpkin top cut where I can take the pumpkin head off, the pumpkin top off. All right, about a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch. Oh, these are stiff. Okay, so this is the anterior portion of the eye. I can still see the cornea and the sclera. Have some conjunctiva here too. And if I flip this over, we can see that we've got some gooey stuff, and that's the vitreous humor. It's gel-like, and I'm just going to rub it off, okay, so that I can see here on the inside. Do you see that it looks like it has a cellophane wrapper right there? That's pretty normal. I don't want that. It actually has a name. I'm not going to worry about it. But we need to gain access to the anterior part. So if that cellophane-like membrane stays with the eyeball, go ahead and take that off. All right, so now I've got the anterior portion. Okay, so what we'll do is, if I put my blunt probe inside through the opening and flip it over, can you see the tip of my blunt probe through the cornea? So the cornea should be transparent, but because of the preservation process, it is no longer transparent. So my blunt probe is inside of the eye. Specifically, it's inside the anterior chamber of the eye. Now the eyeball is divided into a couple of different spaces. So the space between the lens. So right here is the lens. It looks like a little pearl onion. Oh, that just kind of came out. This little pearl onion. This is the lens. It's composed of protein, and it's really hard because of the preservation process. But in a normal individual, in a living individual, it would be soft. And then as we change shape, that allows focusing. So this is the lens. Now, the lens might be sitting on your specimen when you take it off, just like this. And if it does, just pop it off, okay? Sometimes it takes a little bit more than that, but it will come off, okay? And we want to gain access to this anterior segment. Now the anterior segment is all the space between the lens and the cornea, okay? Now the anterior segment can be divided into two smaller sections, but let's talk about the different structures first. Can you see, I don't know if you can, okay, so right here it's got these ribs. Where it's ribbed and black, that is the ciliary body. And the ciliary body is attached to the lens by suspensory zonules, or suspensory ligaments, ciliary zonules. And in this particular specimen, they did not survive the preservation, so we don't get to see those at all in this specimen. So this is a ciliary body, And then moving interiorly, you see that we've got another layer of black that doesn't have the ribs. So right here we've got ribs, but here we don't. So this section right here that goes all the way around, that's the iris. Now, the opening in the iris is called the pupil. That's correct. Now the space between the cornea and the iris, where my blunt probe is right now, that is the anterior chamber of the anterior segment. And there's a space between the iris and the lens, so now my blunt probe is in the posterior chamber of the anterior segment. So the anterior segment is all the space in front of the lens to the cornea, but specifically in front of and behind the lens, we've got two other spaces, the anterior chamber and the posterior chamber of the anterior segment. Now, the space is filled with aqueous humor. So on the dissection tray, you probably have a little fluid. That's the aqueous humor. Okay, fills the space there. On this particular specimen, on the posterior part, we want to get rid of the vitreous body. So there is the vitreous body. Usually it's a little bit clearer, but it has a consistency of like jello, and we like to move it around the tray. So this is the vitreous body, or the vitreous humor, and it helps to hold the eyeball in its shape. In addition, it holds the retina to the wall of the eye. So let's look at the layers here first. Okay, so the outermost layer, the fibrous layer right here, because this is the white part, this is the sclera, and then you can see that there's a black layer. So if I use my blunt probe, I can probably, maybe, yeah, get between, and you can see that I'm touching a black layer. That's the choroid layer. So we've got the sclera, the choroid, and then lining the space here, we've got the retina. Now the retina is only about three cells thick, so it's very, very thin. It's like wet tissue paper, and the more you play with it, the more you damage it. So I'm playing with the retina. So as I play with it, I'm actually damaging it. Okay? Now, before I damage it too much, I want to draw your attention to, do you see where there's these little folds that are all going to the center? Right there, that's the optic disc, or the blind spot. That's right. Okay, so right there's the blind spot. If we go to the other side of the eye, that's where the optic nerve is exiting out, but we've got lots of structures on top of it, so it's actually kind of hard to see in this one. So there's the optic disc, or the blind spot. It's where all of these lines are coming together in like a star. The choroid is the black, but the cow eye is actually modified, and if we move a little bit of the retina out of the way, you can see that it's modified. It's got a beautiful abalone shell-like color, and that's called the tapetum lucidum. And the tapetum lucidum is used to reflect the light. So the light enters into the eye, passes through the iris, passes through the lens, passes through the vitreous humor, passes through the retina, hits the tapetum lucidum, and bounces around. So at night, the cow actually has better vision because it's got the tapetum lucidum. We do not have a tapetum lucidum, so we have a hard time seeing at night. You know, an animal has a tapetum lucidum if you're driving down the road and you see its eyes close. The headlights from your car is passing through the cornea, passing through the iris, through the lens, through the vitreous humor, and it's bouncing around the choroid layer. And that's what gives people their glowing eyes look. Actually, not people, but animals at night when you're driving by. And this space back here is the posterior segment. Woohoo? Woohoo. All right. You want to do it again just because we have this other eyeball here? Sure, why not? It's a prettier eyeball, right? Have the cornea. This membrane that I'm lifting up was the conjunctiva. This white hard stuff is the sclera. The ruffles around the edge, extrinsic eye muscles. Posterior portion, we've got this yellowish soft stuff, adipose. And then in the center here, this nub was the optic nerve. That's right. Okay, so we're going to make a cut about 5 millimeters, 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch from the edge of the cornea. All right. I can actually feel that I've been through. Oh, yep. Used a little strength there, didn't I? Dry that off so I can save it for later. Stays nice and sharp. Use my stiff scissors if I can find where I made that cut. There we go. Ah. No kidding, tough. I actually prefer a razor blade, but since you guys don't get one, I'm going to try not to use one. Plus I don't have one handy. Alright, so we're going to take the top off the pumpkin. Oh yeah, that's much clearer, huh? So here is the anterior portion of the eye. The lens is still there. I'm going to pop the lens off. Now as I pop the lens off, do you see that it's got these little black lines, very tiny here on the edge? Little tiny black lines right there on the edge. Those are the suspensory ligaments, the ciliary zonules that I was talking about. Alrighty. So there's my lens. Got some jelly-like vitreous. This has a little bit better of a design here that we can see, or at least film. Yeah, record. I guess I'm not filming. All right. Rib portion is the ciliary body. And then we have lacking the ribs, making the hole in the center. This is the iris. The opening is the pupil. And my blunt probe is in a space between the cornea and the iris. So what was that space called? Anterior chamber, that's right. And then here on this side of the iris, it's now in the posterior chamber. And together, between the lens and the cornea, that space was the anterior segment. Yeah, okay. So that's the front part. And in this one, you can see here that the retina is a very soft structure. It's only held in place against the wall by the vitreous humor. And the preservative process is quite a bit different in this specimen, and so the vitreous definitely lost its gel-like consistency. But we can still see the white outer sclera. I can lift up the black choroid. Looks like there's a hole there. There's the choroid. And then move the retina, the wet tissue paper, expose a portion of the choroid, which is the tapetum lucidum. That's right. And in this one, let's see, kind of looks like all the lines are going right here. So right here must be the blind spot, and if we flip it over, right there, optic nerve, what do you know? All right, your turn. Have fun with that. Talk to you soon.